This violin belonged to Gaetano Pugnani, a celebrated virtuoso and composer of the 18th century. It was built in Cremona in 1736 by Giuseppe Guarneri del Gesù, the luthier who shares with Stradivari the primacy in the history of violin manufacturing. Since the Palace of Stupinici was occasionally used for court celebrations, it is not too fanciful to imagine that 250 years ago, this exceptional instrument might have already been played in this venue by Pugnani himself, perhaps presenting the same music. Pugnani held in Turin the post of First Musician to the King and was appointed Director of the Royal Chapel of Music. In the 1770s, in a forgotten hill of the Monferrato, a young gentleman, not yet 20 years old, began to collect precious stringed instruments in the family castle of Salabue. His name was Ignazio Alessandro Cozio. He succeeded in forming an extraordinary collection of stringed instruments, one of the most valuable of his time, becoming the most important violin-making specialist of the first half of the 19th century. In 1771, when the outstanding violin maker Giovanni Battista Guadagnini moved from Parma to Turin, a very close working relationship developed between Cozio and Guadagnini. Not only did Giovanni Battista craft some admirable violins for the Count, such as the 1774 specimen, which we are listening to, he was also a skilled and successful procurer of valuable artifacts, enlarging the collection housed in the castle. Among these instruments was a group of 10 Stradivarius violins, bought as a single lot in 1775, including the Messiah, the most extraordinary specimen of all time, which is today preserved at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. After the sad end of the Salabue collection, which had been an unparalleled nucleus in the history of stringed instrument collecting, all these instruments were eventually dispersed throughout the world, often becoming the subjects of fascinating stories. Of all the guitars built in Paris by Jean Vauboam in the 17th century, only 20 have survived. This specimen is one of the 7 so-called à décor, decorated with tortoiseshell, ebony and ivory. It was probably donated to Louis of France, the Grand Dauphin, by his father, Louis XIV, the Sun King, who was himself an amateur guitarist since his childhood. The court musician Robert de Vizet recalls seeing the great king playing the guitar with the same hand that gives the order for battles and imposes laws over the whole earth. The friendship between Antonio de Torres and Federico Cano is a perfect example of symbiosis between a luthier and a musician. In fact, during the second half of the 19th century, Torres was the guitar maker who set the instrument's size, shape and construction technique. and is today considered the inventor of the modern guitar. And Federico Cano was the guitarist who could better bring out the innermost potential of his friend's instruments. The point of view of aesthetics and decoration, the salterio is one of the most seductive instruments. This rare sample, built by the Florentine luthier Antonio Berti in 1724, belonged to Maria Teresa Strozzi, a Tuscan noblewoman who lived in Rome and Florence in the 18th century. This lyre guitar, which was owned by the Neapolitan princess Maria Cristina of Bourbon, takes us to Allier, one of the most beautiful castles of Piedmont. It was built in 1816 by the prominent Neapolitan luthier Gennaro Fabbricatore, when Maria Cristina married Carlo Felice, Duke of Savoy. She became queen 5 years later, and she lived in the castle of Allier far more than in the palace of Turin, where we can imagine her during regal, musical evenings. At the time when Maria Cristina's lyre guitar was being built in Naples, at Mirecourt in the east of France, another beautiful lyre was built for Marie-Thérèse of France by François Breton in 1814. It was not just a musical instrument, but also a hymn to the glory of the Bourbons, who had returned to the throne after the Revolution. Marie-Thérèse, daughter of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, was little more than a child when she was detained in the Temple prison. Her father and mother guillotined, and her little brother died of hardship. After the Restoration, Marie-Thérèse adopted the title of Duchess of Angoulême. It is curious that the legendary violin virtuoso Niccolò Paganini never performed in public with the guitar, for which, however, he wrote a good number of compositions, but only privately among his friends. He owned 3 guitars. 2 were built in 1826 in the Neapolitan workshop of Gennaro Fabbricatore. The 3rd was made in Paris in 1797 by the luthier Horry. We return to Naples and to another renowned luthier, Pasquale Vinaccia. This regal instrument, a Neapolitan mandolin, was built in 1881 for Margherita of Savoy, the first queen of Italy, who had captured the hearts of the nation, becoming the symbol of national identity in post-unitary Italy. She was also an extremely cultured and knowledgeable woman. At the Quirinal Palace, she often presented music and literature gatherings in her elegant library, with shelves inlaid by cabinet maker Pietro Piffetti from Torino. Margherita had a particular talent for plucked instruments, and being herself a good amateur mandolin player, she encouraged the spread of a real national fashion.
Prime note che ho fatto sul violino pensavo che potenza, che forte nel senso ricco, che quanti colori ha questo violino e anche quanto orizzonte c'è quando si suona questo violino. C'è sempre ancora un mondo dietro che aspetta essere scoperto e si cresce insieme con lo strumento e si sviluppa anche un altro modo di suonare che va insieme col carattere del violino, che è una cosa appassionante e fantastica.
The violin in the hands of the well-known German performer Isabel Faust is a legendary Stradivarius specimen dating back to 1710, an instrument worth $18 million. The fame of Stradivari, who is claimed to be the greatest violin maker of all time, is such that his name is synonymous with violin making. Living to the age of 93, Stradivari built almost 1,000 violins of unparalleled sound. This specimen belonged to the Belgian virtuoso and composer Henri Vieuxtemps, who wrote 7 violin concertos. The history of the hurdy-gurdy is a curious one. Formerly the instrument of beggars and blind street musicians, it then became fashionable among the French aristocracy and upper bourgeoisie for much of the 18th century. But right after the French Revolution, soon went back to being a folk instrument. This beautiful small-sized specimen, built in Paris by Pierre Louvet in 1738, is a testimony to the instrument's heyday. In 1683, the army of Leopold I of Habsburg, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, saved Christianity, winning a great battle against the Turks who had surrounded the walls of Vienna. Leopold was also a fine musician. He composed oratorios, operas and instrumental suites. This guitar was built in Prague in 1676 by Leonhard Prater, perhaps on the occasion of Leopold's marriage. We are listening to one of the very few compositions left by Ida Presti. In 1936, when she first performed in Paris at a very young age, the already famous Andrés Segovia said he could not teach her anything. Yet she was only a 12-year-old girl. The child prodigy Ida Presti was destined to worldwide glory, performing as a duet with her second husband, Alexander Lagoya. Julián Gómez Ramírez, a Spanish luthier who settled in Paris, built Ida's first guitars, including this specimen dated 1936, which she played for most of her career. This harp developed from the hands of the Parisian maker Jean-Henri Naderman in 1785. Naderman started as a simple carpenter and soon became a luthier specialized in building harps, to the point of being commissioned to make 2 instruments for Queen Marie Antoinette. A distinguished Italian character, during his childhood listened to this harp played by his mother, Cristina Morozzo of Bionze, in his aristocratic residence in Turin. The child was the future Italian artist, writer and statesman Massimo d'Azeglio.